And for those that don't know, if they would have ignited this within hours, there would be almost zero problem. Almost all of it would have burned off at the source. Carbon dioxide would have been put into the atmosphere, much smaller than a volcano, would have literally had almost no effect if they would have done what the old-timers did and set that sucker on fire until they figured out a plan to cap it. And now we know why 35 days later, the White House has done everything they can to block this, because now they're going to get their carbon taxes that Paul Volcker demands we must have to pay Goldman Sachs their bonuses. Now they're going to get it.
Let me tell you, okay, so we know what BP actually did engineer this, and the Greens are biting them as you knew they would. BP and Enron were in on this from the beginning. Again, I was in the room. There's no point denying it. The Greens did tell the White House, don't burn it off. We just know the White House said, don't burn it off. It probably is a coincidence, and they weren't taking their marching orders from the Greens. But we know BP's been pushing an agenda that John Kerry said, even after the spill, ironically, he said, I've been working with these companies, BP and Shell, to write this law. He said this. It's, again, in the public domain. So Harry Reid said, I'm going to suspend the committee process like with health care. John Kerry said, I'm not going to call this bill cap and trade because I don't know what cap and trade means. Yes, he does. And it has cap and trade in it. He just said it's mean if you call it that because, of course, there's a memo I talk about in Power Grab written by Stanley Greenberg, who was Bill Clinton's pollster. He conducted some polling, and he said to his clients, who are Democratic politicians, you have to do two things. Stop saying cap and trade and global warming and start calling it something else, and then it might work. Don't change your agenda. Just call the agenda something else.
Yeah, he called it our deteriorating atmosphere.
Well, he said, here are the catchphrases that I've polled well. Green jobs and clean energy. So John Kerry said, I don't want to call it cap and trade. I don't know what cap and trade means. It's a jobs and national security bill, clean energy. Of course it is, dear. Joe Lieberman said, I don't want to call it cap and trade because you remember the artist formerly known as Prince? Well, this is now called pollution emission. He said that. This is now called a pollution emission reduction credits or something. He won't say cap and trade. Lindsey Graham said 2 weeks ago, this isn't a global warming bill because global warming no longer exists as a reason to pass legislation. It's still the same bill. He still said he'd vote for it. He just took his name. He said, I won't be a sponsor because I'll get in all sorts of trouble with my constituents, but I'll still support it. But it's no longer the reason that it's always been. The point of all this is where I begin with the book. Nobody says cap and trade would detectably impact the climate. I repeat, nobody says the temperature after cap and trade would be any different than it otherwise was going to be. It's not about the temperature. It was offered in the name of the temperature. Their pollster told them to cut it out.
Of course, it's about deciding who can have industry, who can have businesses, and taxing the hell out of us.
Yep. And in fact, here's what I do. I begin by pointing out, we know it's not about the climate, so what's it about? Well, it turns out it's about power. It turns out that it is about they can't trust you with your various freedoms that they never thought they could trust you with anyway. And I've got quotes in here that are out there that for some reason nobody's running with. Carol Browner gave it, she's the energy and climate czar, who had a phony position, that position created for her, because she could never achieve Senate confirmation, and she would cause great political havoc, of course, having been a commissioner for the Socialist International, if Obama tried to get her confirmed. She was put into this phony position to lord over cabinet officials, and she gave an interview to U.S. News in March of last year in which she said, it's their objective to get to the point where the electric utilities hold back power from you so that you'll still be able to cool your home, just not as much as you would like. Meaning what, Alex? As much as they would like. They're admitting it.
Stay there. This is incredible. Let's come back and talk about the control freak panopticon. And Texas, I already had it put into my office. I couldn't say no. California, they're going to remote control your thermostat. They're going to run everything and surveil you. We'll be back with our guest. All right, Chris Horner's new book is... We'll tell you how to get that before he leaves us. Very important info, but all his books are bestsellers, so you'll see it all over the place. And again, I research this constantly. Everything he's saying is on record. That's he's bringing up Carol Browner, and he's going to go over more of these, like, we'll control your thermostat, we'll run your life, we're your God. What about Elena Kagan? Over and over again saying, if we don't like your speech, it's banned. Or Cass Sunstein, or we're going to get your guns, or... the White House science czar, we're going to put stuff in the water to sterilize you. I mean, folks, I don't just say this. I have their white papers. Here's Elena Kagan, University of Chicago Law Review. I mean, I've got I've got the White House science czar's own textbook right here. These people are in league with Hitler and Stalin. And I don't say that for rhetoric. Let me go back to my guest. Chris, you started reading her quotes. It's like a bad dream. I mean, how can these people be such dirtbags, so obviously evil, and such a threat to everybody? I mean, most people I know with money are fleeing the country. Go ahead.
Well, they have this their utopian vision. It's dystopian, you ask me, but this idea that they will organize society. What changes is their vehicle. What's the excuse? What's the latest victim that has to be rescued from the horrors of individual liberty? And it was, of course, the worker, and the worker threw off those shackles, so it became the environment, which can't speak back. Wealthier is healthier. They have to know this, but they really hate wealth. It's just the excuse, the latest excuse. Freedom brings wealth, so they attack your freedom. How badly? Well, all right, the president has given some speeches that in isolation just seem weird. He said, of course, under my plan of a cap-and-trade system, electricity prices would necessarily skyrocket. He said he would use it to bankrupt industries he didn't like. His quote was, coal, natural gas, whatever the industries. Then he admitted it would be passed on to the consumer, and he said, and this will also raise billions of dollars. Well, in the book, I detail how I used FOIA to get Treasury documents that say, there was a memo written 6 days after Obama was elected, in which they said, he wants to do this, here's what we can do. And under the justification paragraph, they wrote revenues. This will raise, quote, possibly up to several percentage points of GDP, parentheses, i.e., the equivalent of the corporate income tax rate, or corporate income tax. The corporate income tax, among the highest in the world, raises $400 billion per year. The biggest tax increase in our history to pay off World War II, which was an expiring tax, in constant dollars is $107 billion per year. So we're talking about a spectacular amount of money. But they don't just want to steal your money, they want to steal your freedoms. He gave another speech in which he said, you can't eat what you want, drive what you want, or put your thermostat where you want. The specific quote was, we can't eat as much as we want, drive our SUVs, and keep our thermostats at 72 degrees at all times, and expect that other countries are just going to say, okay. Well, I didn't ask, okay. But B, what is the President of the United States doing, obsessing about how much I can eat, what I can drive, and where I can put my thermostat?
Well, he's also against other countries and invoking hatred of us, just like he had Calderon here last week saying, ban all our semi-automatic rifles and handguns. This is the Socialist Internationale. This is their mode.
Well, sovereignty is not a big thing to them. They do believe that one way to skin this cat is through global governance is not the same as a global government, though the global governance crowd would, of course, love that. I'm just saying, he's a big proponent of global governance. What I'd like to do, if we can stay when I come back, is talk about the way they want to control your thermostat, and you're not going to believe the documents that someone slipped me. But the Guardian in the UK, Old Red herself, reported that the Obama administration was briefing European diplomats before Copenhagen, that failed globe, thank goodness.
Oh, yeah, no, they're going to tax you for any amount, and then they say in peak times they're going to control it. That's actually, they're announcing that in California. Start getting into it right now.
Well, okay, they want to use these things called smart meters. Smart meters put the meat on the bones of what Carol Browner said when she said, we want to get to a system whereby the utility holds back power from you. Why would a utility hold back power from you? They're in the business of selling you power. Because there's physical scarcity, which this crowd is arranging, as I detail in the book, and because they've got a requirement that they hold back power from you. So the state is going to use the utility, according to the Energy Czar, to decide, she said, you'll still be able to cool your home, just not as much as you would like, which means just as much as they would like. Well, it turns out the Assistant Secretary of Energy for Energy Efficiency, a woman who was Al Gore's CEO before she took this job, making $325,000 a year as a Green Pressure Group CEO, she divested herself of utility stocks because, of course, the appearances would be terrible if she didn't. But someone slipped me her financial disclosure documents, and guess what? She held on to $500,000 in a smart meter company.
Oh.
Yeah, how about that? Assistant Secretary of Energy for Energy Efficiency, in charge of getting the smart meter mandate in, that Carol Browner says is the way that you can't control your thermostat, the state will. And we've got a woman who held on to between $265,000 and $550,000 of smart meter company stock, in addition to another green jobs company her husband.
It's incredible. Stay there. This is why I get angry, and you should be angry too. They're openly saying they're going to decide what temp your house is. Naked body scanners aren't enough. All their taxes aren't enough. Nothing is enough for these people.